From the Oklahoman studios in downtown Oklahoma City, you're watching Thunder Thursday. I'm your host, Darnell Mayberry, assistant sports editor here at the Oklahoman, joined by my closest work friends as always, columnist Jenni Carlson, Thunder beat writer Eric Horn, and columnist Barry Trammell. Guys, the Thunder schedule was released this week. The whole NBA schedule was released. Eric, what were your first impressions of the Thunder schedule? What can you tell us, and what were your impressions?
Well, my first impression was it seemed like a pretty workable schedule. I was just thinking about immediately, the first thing I was looking for were those long road stretches like they had last year. They had that big road stretch in January where they went 12-15 on the road. The longest road stretch for the Thunder this year is 3 games. So they got a bunch of 3-game clusters where they're going on the road, but there's nothing crazy like they had last year where they had a long road stretch in January. This wasn't a very good road team last year. Of course, we know they're going to be improved with Paul George, but it still remains to be seen how some of these players play on the road, like Doug McDermott's, Alex Abrines'. It's still a young team, but to me, that was one thing that immediately stood out, was that you're not going to have a ton of long road trips.
Barry, your takeaways?
Oh, I think the extra 2 weeks on the schedule made it a better schedule for everybody. When you're not condensing everything, the back-to-backs, the 4 and 5 stretches, the 5 and 7 stretches, those have been minimized. So I think that's good for everybody. The Thunder schedule does seem balanced. The last couple of years it's had stretches where tons of home games. Last year in November, early December, just an avalanche of home games. Thunder paid for it later in the season. You have much better balance. There's one stretch, I think it's in February, early March, where I think 6 of 7 are on the road, and there's one home game in 3 weeks. One of those weeks is All-Star Week, though, so it's not as bad as it sounds. That's been minimized by this new schedule policy.
I think it's interesting, as Eric pointed out in the Tuesday paper after the schedule came out, the 3 sort of notable stretches in this team schedule. The one that's early in the season, 6 of 7 during that stretch that's on the road. And with a team that, while we all think it's going to be a team that works out pretty well together with the addition of Paul George into this roster, it's still going to be a work in progress at that point in the year. So you've got a couple games against Minnesota, another team that's revamped and looking to be a lot better. Some tricky games. I think it'll be really interesting to see how this team responds with that early stretch at a time when you're still seeing them come together, because they are going to have fewer preseason games, which sign me up for that, fewer preseason games. But still, for a team that's going to try to figure out exactly who it is, what it is, and how it best plays together, to have that early stretch of games is going to be really interesting to see.
And not to mention, that's going to be a stretch where, if the Thunder's cautious with Patrick Patterson coming off of his knee scope beginning the season, you're not going to know exactly what you're going to get out of Patrick Patterson if you're a fan. Is he going to be ready for camp? He probably could be if they brought him back in the 4 to 6 week time span that they think it's going to be. But they're going to be cautious with him, and during the beginning of the season, it's an important part for the team to gel and everything. And we'll see who starts there. It's probably going to be Patrick Patterson, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're slow with his progression.
Eric, go back to the lengths that the league has gone to make the schedule a little more, a little easier for the players. How much is that going to help? What are you hearing in terms of what that's going to do for the players this season?
Well, I think it helps the players, and it also helps the league's product as well, because you got a situation where, for example, with the ABC games that the league is assigned to the teams, these premier games where they want the biggest stars playing, it's going to be a situation where teams aren't going to have a day before the ABC games. They're not going to have a game the day after the ABC games. So you're going to have a situation where these teams really don't have excuses for players sitting out. If it's a back-to-back scenario, because there aren't going to be any back-to-back scenarios when it comes to those big premier ABC games. So the league is not only looking out for the players, they're also looking out for their product as well, and I think it worked out the way that they did the schedule.
The question I have is, does any of that, though, change what a Greg Popovich does?
No.
No. I mean, that really became a big issue. Now, I know you had the Cavs and LeBron. They were involved in some of the sitting players and, some other teams as well, but I don't think a guy like Greg Popovich does anything different. I think he's going to sit who he's going to sit when he wants to sit him. I don't know what the league can do about that. I like giving these guys more rest days, more time to recover. I think it's a smart thing to do, but I still think you're going to have coaches like Greg Popovich, who they don't care how many days rest they have. They're not going to play those guys in some of those situations.
I can tell you what the NBA is doing about Greg Popovich is the Spurs, for the several years in a row, have gotten fewer national TV appearances than franchises that are not as successful, the Thunder being one of them. And the networks have just declared, I think, have sent the message to New York, hey, guys, we're going to pull back on the Spurs. If they don't want to play their best guys, we don't want to show them. And the result is Spurs still got a ton of national TV games, but they're not there in the top 3 or 4 with the Warriors, the Cavs, the Rockets, the Thunder.
In the league eliminating 4 and 5 nights altogether, that was a great job by the league doing that. It's going to help these guys once it comes playoff time. We saw a situation where a guy like James Harden, who had the ball in his hands all season, he was burned out by the time he got to the San Antonio series. So it's really going to help a lot of these teams in terms of resting their star players, particularly teams like Houston. You got Chris Paul, who's got an injury history. You got a guy like James Harden again who burned out. Russell Westbrook's going to be carrying a heavy load. So it's really going to help those teams going into the postseason the way that the regular season schedule has been reconfigured.
Barry, did the league get it right? That's the question I have for you, because we did see so many players resting on prominent nights in the NBA last season. There was a report that when the Cavs came here, that they were going to rest all 3 of their big players, LeBron James, Kevin Love, and Kyrie Irving. It didn't end up happening, but everyone was fearful that it would. Did the league get it right in doing what they did to try to curb this?
Well, we don't know. I think it's the right move to try. We'll see if it works. I think it mostly will work. Not having a game before or after anybody is playing one of the ABC games, that's a nice start. Eventually, what needs to happen is whatever steps you can do to eliminate all back-to-backs is really what needs to happen, because it's sort of madness. If you read accounts of people being truthful as they look back on their career and look back on the way things were done, a lot of guys are just mannequins on a road trip, second night of a back-to-back. You playing Milwaukee on a Tuesday and playing Miami on a Wednesday, or playing Chicago on a Saturday, playing LA on a Sunday. Just physically, it's not there, even whether the coach sits them out or not. It hurts the product, even if the coaches are fully cooperating. So the league had to do something. I think it's a good move. We'll see how it works.
Jenni, one of the consequences to what the league had to do was they stretched out the length of the season. And for us in a college football market, we now have 3 Saturday night games that are going head-to-head with college football. What do you make of that? Is that going to be a problem for the league, do you think? What impact do you think that's going to have?
It is an interesting question. I was sitting here thinking about, I don't remember who said what that spurred this in my brain, but I was thinking about the college basketball season and how around here we've advocated in a variety of ways to push back some of the college basketball season because it so butts up against college football, and you just don't get the attention for some of those preseason or non-conference games early in the season of that college basketball schedule. You wonder, are we going to have the same situation involving the NBA? I think the NBA brand is big enough in enough markets where it won't be an overall problem, but pretty clearly around here, Saturday nights, through the end of November are pretty set. People know what they're going to be doing. They like focusing on the football. So, I don't know what that's going to do to the crowds. I assume that people will, sell tickets and they'll be willing buyers and you'll still see packed arenas. But it is an interesting question, and we'll be really curious to see, or I will be curious to see what those TV numbers look like, because Oklahoma City has had really good viewership numbers when it comes to Thunder games. And if they're marquee games, what does that look like against the college football schedule?
And shout out to the league for, as Barry said, trying to alter the schedule, because you have a situation where the NBA is actually listening to their players. Players have said for years, there's too many preseason games. They cut back the preseason. There's too many back-to-backs. They worked year after year cutting back the back-to-backs. Whereas you have a league like the NFL, which we all love to digest, we all love to watch. They're adding games on Thursdays they're adding games on Thursdays and giving these teams short weeks, and one of the most dangerous sports in the world. So it seems like the NBA is really listening to the players and listening to the union and really taking the players' health into account. Now, it's awesome when the players and the teams also, you know, work in unison with the league to make sure that they're playing on the biggest stage. You don't want LeBron James and Steph Curry sitting in the biggest games of the year where LeBron's on the sidelines sipping a coffee. So it seems like they're kind of in cahoots to make this thing work as best as possible, and I think it's going to be great for the league.
Barry, 5 years ago, we had the NBA lockout. The NBA season was shortened from 82 games to 66 games, I believe, and you had a groundswell of fan support in favor of a shorter NBA season, shorter games, fewer games. Any concern on your part that they're extending the NBA season, the length of the season itself?
No, I think the shortened season was attractive to fans in part. I think it was attractive to season ticket holders because of the financial commitment and the time commitment. I mean, even if you got the money for a season ticket, do you have the time to commit 41 nights of a 6-month stretch? That's a lot of commitment. So I think fans sort of thought that was pretty cool. A 33-night commitment instead. Unfortunately, there's no way to replicate that revenue, so it's not happening. College football's not going back to 11 games. Major League Baseball's not cutting down the number of games. The NFL's not shortening the season. Nobody's shortening their season. The money demands that they play those games.
And the television networks just paid $24 billion for this.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, guys, let's talk about other impressions of the schedule. What are you most looking forward to? Is there a stretch? Is there a game? What are you guys most looking forward to? It's announced that they're playing on Christmas against the Houston Rockets. That's a 7 p.m. game here at Chesapeake Energy Arena. New Year's Eve, the annual New Year's Eve game, is December 31st against the Dallas Mavericks. What other standouts to the schedule did you guys notice?
Well, I thought that, you know, the amount of national TV games that they got was clearly an indication that the Thunder is one of the teams to watch this year. Barry's blogged about it this week. I wrote about it as well. You know, they're basically the fourth most watched or watchable or viewed team in the league in terms of their demand, behind Cleveland, Golden State, and Houston. And you know, they've got 36 national TV games. They're going to be playing in Mexico. They're playing on basically every significant day on the NBA schedule. And particularly the Christmas game against Houston is one that I'm really intrigued about, just because of the playoff series we're coming off of, the James Harden factor, the Chris Paul factor, and we saw this Thunder team really struggle without Russell Westbrook on the floor against Houston. And it's going to be great to see how much stride they've made in terms of getting closer to Houston, or maybe even going past Houston in the Western Conference. That's going to be a team. Those two teams are going to be battling for the 2 seed with San Antonio, which Darnell thinks.
I think the Thunder's the number 2 seed in the West.
I'm skeptical, but we'll see about that. I think if they don't get a home seed, we're going to be very disappointed. And you know, Houston and the Thunder, I think, are going to be very close in terms of their record this season.
My favorite aspect of this schedule is way down on the list of, I think, things most people will love. But I love the Martin Luther King Day game here in Oklahoma City. That's on January 15th, Sacramento. I mean, say what you will about Sacramento coming to town. Buddy Hield, but I love live sports in the daytime.
Live sports in the day.
And the Thunder has played some of these MLK games on the road in other places. I think it'll be kind of cool and fun to have something different. I love the Christmas night. I love that it's a night game here. You know, obviously the Warriors and, you know, all these great matchups of these teams that have, you know, accumulated superstars in the West. Any of those are going to be fantastic. But that's something we haven't had. We haven't had a day MLK game in Oklahoma City, and so I'm looking forward to that.
Have we ever had a day game in Oklahoma City?
Yeah, not on a weekday.
Yeah, Saturdays and Sundays. Yeah, right, Sunday.
So that'll be different.
And that's very rare. In fact, they experimented last season with a game or two on Sunday afternoon. Historically, all the Sunday games have been at night.
Yeah, that's true. They've done some ABC. Playoff games.
Noonish.
Some stuff like that. Barry, what are you most looking forward to?
The Knicks season opener. Just get here, start playing.
You're looking forward to the season opener, not the Knicks.
No, Knicks too. Although this new uniform policy could submarine the whole thing, but as goofy as the Knicks are, as awful as their roster is, those blue uniforms are glorious. And so if the Thunder will just cooperate and wear white, the Knicks can wear those blue and orange, and NBA basketball will be back. The Knicks blue jerseys will be in the house.
Kristaps Porzingis will be in the house.
Well, whoever they got, I don't care who they got. But The Knicks being in
they don't seem to care who they got. Let's be honest.
Ron Baker's
the
in the house.
New York Knickerbockers playing in Oklahoma City always is a cool thing to me.
Yeah, Eric, the schedule is one of the best times of the year for NBA fans. What do you feel like is the toughest stretch? What do you feel like is the best stretch for them? I know you don't have it in front of you, but just from what you've written, what can you tell Thunder fans about what they should be concerned about in terms of toughest stretch and what they should feel good about easiest stretch?
Well, there's a stretch in the beginning of the season that Jenni was talking about. You got 6 or 7 6 out of the 7 on the road. You got 2 against a Minnesota team that's going to be really improved, that could potentially be a 50-win team. Then you got a stretch coming out of the All-Star break where you're going to have a cluster of games on the road, maybe 6 or 7 are in that range, where you're going to have Golden State. You're going to have a couple of games against Utah. Now, while Utah lost Gordon Hayward, they're still going to be a really good defensive team. They picked up Thabo Sefolosha, which the Thunder might want to knock on his door this offseason, but we don't know if that happened. Who knows? But, there's a couple of those road stretches where, while I talked about they're going to be the longest road stretch for them is going to be 3 games. They'll come back for a game, and then they'll go back on the road for another 3 games. So some of those clusters like that are going to be interesting to watch. They've always had trouble on the road against a team like Portland in recent seasons. For some unknown reason, they go to Portland and just stink it up. So whenever you get a cluster of games like that, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they respond. And then, again, injuries. If they come up with any significant injuries, or even an injury to a guy like Enes Kanter, and they go on the road, they might just lay a stinker. Or you might have a situation where Russell Westbrook just says, I'm not playing tonight. He did that. He did that last year. He did that in Memphis where he got upset with a couple of calls, and he was like, I'm out of here. They kick him out. They get blown out by 35-some-odd points because Troy Williams is hitting a bunch of threes or some guy like that. So I think the Thunder, anytime they get a big cluster of road games in a row, I think that's something to watch. Because of the age of this team and just their unpredictability on the road in the past couple seasons.
The November schedule, guys, is really, when you think about the number of teams that went through transformative stages this offseason with, whether you're talking about Boston getting Gordon Hayward or, obviously the Clippers losing Chris Paul. If you look at the November schedule, it's got everybody from Boston to the Clippers to, again, San Antonio, maybe not transformative, but these teams, Golden State is late in the schedule. Just teams that, whether it's they've been transformed and you think they're going to be improved, or you just want to see where the Thunder is. I think we talked, Eric, the other day in here in the video studio about, obviously there's the juice of the Warriors, and there's always going to be that sort of, the tension of that game, no matter where and when they play it. But as much as anything, with this Paul George acquisition, to see where the Thunder is in terms of the Warriors, and then you look at some of those other teams in November, it's going to be really interesting to see where are they? Where are they in terms of, going against the Clippers, going against the Warriors, going against, Boston, any of those other teams that are thrown out there that are also going through some transformations. To me, November, when we're right in the thick of football season, it's going to be really, really interesting.
Speaking of November, Jenni, we barely mentioned the Warriors, which I know a lot of people don't really like to talk about around here, but November 22nd, the Warriors are coming to town. It'll be Kevin Durant's return to Oklahoma City. Guys, I'm looking forward to that, but not because of the Warriors, not because of Steph Curry, not because of Kevin Durant, because of Zaza Pachulia. Russell Westbrook owes Zaza Pachulia, and they didn't get to play again last year after what went down in Golden State last year. I'm looking forward. Bear, do you think anything happens November 22nd? It's a Wednesday night.
With Zaza?
With Zaza and Russell.
I think that's largely going to be.
Russell Westbrook is not a man who forgets things easily.
No, you're right. However, I think there's new fields to be fertilized. So I don't think he's gonna. I think Russell's he's got it in the deep corners of his mind, but I don't think he wants to. I don't think he wants to try to implement any kind of revenge in a situation like that. He knows that trying to keep the Warriors docile is sort of the best plan. You don't want to wake them up if they're a little bit fat and sassy. You don't want to get them worked up. So
that's how I always think of Kevin Durant.
Just try to beat him. How about that for a plan before you try to exact revenge on Zaza Pachulia?
Yeah, how much the Thunder's closed the gap between the Warriors themselves and the Warriors, themselves and the Spurs, themselves and Houston, I think are going to be the most fascinating storylines to watch during the season on the court. Another one that hasn't been talked about a ton, but there have been kind of some sprinkles of it out there in the media, particularly with some media folks on the Bay, is media folks on the Bay think that the Warriors have kind of an eye on Paul George. I'm intrigued to see how the Paul George questions come when he goes to Golden State, when Golden State comes here, how he responds to being asked about that. Because, look, we might want to deny it, whether you're a Thunder fan, you're somebody who covers the Thunder, or somebody nationally, but the Warriors and their success, it has appeal to players. And Paul George has talked openly about, the allure of L.A., the allure of going back home. Well, the Bay in Oakland isn't that far from L.A.
400 miles.
Yeah, and that's a place where he
It's
can be
a little far away.
Doesn't seem all that close to me.
Well, it's a place that Paul George could be successful, and I'm not saying that Paul George is going there, but we don't know if he's staying here either. He's going to hit free agency. The Warriors had success bringing in a guy like Kevin Durant. Now you think about the cap implications and how they'd be able to fit all that together. It might take sending a guy like Klay Thompson out. It might take maybe sending a guy like Draymond Green out, which I don't think would happen. Or Paul George just says, well, I'll just take less to play with a great team. We've seen it happen before, Kevin Durant. So I think that's going to be intriguing too, seeing how Paul George responds to some of the questions about his future, whether it's LA in town, whether he's in LA, or whether it's even Golden State, which all of a sudden might emerge as somebody in the Paul George sweepstakes.
All right, that's enough about the Thunder schedule. Let's talk a little bit more about. Russell Westbrook. Eric had a report today. The sports betting site came out and released the MVP odds, the favorite for MVP, and Russell Westbrook was the favorite for MVP. Eric, how did that happen? He got Paul George on his team. You would think that he wouldn't be the favorite, but according to one sports booking site, he is.
I imagine Russell Westbrook will still have the ball in his hands a lot next season. And I imagine he'll still have a ton of triple-doubles. I mean, we've talked about this on the podcast. We're thinking he's going to get it somewhere in the range of 30 triple-doubles, which still seems ridiculous, but he had 42 last season, so he's coming in a little under in our predictions. Russell's still going to have a great statistical season next year. His shooting percentages might even be better when he's surrounded by a guy like Paul George. His efficiency will probably be better, and that stands to make him, one of the top 5 candidates for the MVP race. Now, a guy like Kevin Durant is probably going to start gathering some steam too as the season gets closer, because he's coming off of such a great performance in the finals. But Kevin Durant's also got a guy like Steph Curry to compete with on the same team. So it's going to be interesting to watch. Kawhi Leonard's going to be in the mix, James Harden as well. Always LeBron James, the obligatory Barry Tramel selection for MVP every season. And we'll see what happens with that. But Russell's definitely going to be in the mix. And it's no surprise that he's in the top 2 right now.
I was going to go to Barry, but I know what he's going to say about MVP. I'm glad you said it.
Kick it to him. Let him talk about it.
Let's hear about LeBron.
I'm glad Eric got around to mentioning LeBron James.
I'm not saying it's a wrong choice.
You named literally 59 NBA players before you got to LeBron James.
He's incredible. LeBron's incredible.
Yeah, LeBron can play. That is true.
Breaking.
This just in. Here's what's interesting is most outside of, especially if Kyrie Irving gets traded, you're looking at all the candidates except Kawhi and LeBron have a sidekick now. Harden added Chris Paul. Westbrook added Paul George. Steph Curry won back-to-backs and then added Kevin Durant. So it's got a new sort of synergy to the MVP race in that lots of guys, they sort of cancel each other out.
I've got a dark horse for you guys.
Dark horse.
John Wall.
John Wall.
I knew it. I should have said the obligatory MVP choice for Darnell Mayberry, John Wall.
Jenni, does this make any sense to you? How is Russell Westbrook the favorite? And Kevin Durant was the second favorite behind Russell Westbrook. I think it could have been a guy like Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James. That seems to make a lot more sense. How is Russell still that guy?
Yeah, it is a little bit of a curious thing to me. I mean, to me, Russell's going to have a hard time winning over voters because it's going to be so hard to top what he did last year. I mean, he may get a ton of triple doubles, but is there any way he gets 43 or even, I mean, if he gets 25, I think it's going to be a pretty big deal. Now, he's going to get some because he's that type of player with that type of skill set. But when you, and I'm not saying that he has to get to a certain number to win over voters, but it's going to just be human nature that voters are going to say, this is what this guy did last year, and this is what he did this year, even if the wins are a lot more, or significantly more, which I think they got a good chance to win, get into the 50s, who knows how high, but they're going to get more wins. But, where does, when you're talking about personal awards, I think that voters are going to be weighing Russell Westbrook circa 17-18 against Russell Westbrook circa 16-17, and that's such a high bar. I just think he's going to really struggle. So, maybe he wins it, but it just seems like that's going to be really difficult.
You bring up an excellent point, Jenni. Barry, Eric, either one of you guys can tackle this, but traditionally we've seen voter fatigue for the MVP award. Do you think there's any chance that the voters have triple-double fatigue when it comes to Russell Westbrook next season?
I think that it's possible that there is triple-double fatigue, but even more so, I think it's possible that voters might feel more inclined to pay attention more to what Kevin Durant's doing over the course of an 82-game season. Because Kevin Durant really only played, I think, maybe somewhere in 62, 66 games last year because he had that injury to his knee. When you see Kevin Durant put together a full season, I think people are going to appreciate a little bit more about what he did, and then the Warriors are probably going to end up winning 65, 66 games. They're going to see he's the best player on the best team in the league, which he was last year too. And I think people are going to tend to sway and kind of have that voter fatigue, and maybe we will get desensitized to triple doubles, which is ridiculous in itself. Now, I think Jenni's right. I think the wins this season for Russell Westbrook might play even more into his MVP candidacy than anything. If they get to 55, 57 wins, and they really make a big jump in terms of their win total with Russell Westbrook having more efficiency, I think that's going to help him more than the triple doubles this season.
And I think it'll be interesting too to see, to me, guys, that one of the things that really pushed him over the edge last year, obviously the triple double numbers, that was huge, but the game winners that he hit late in the season, just the sheer volume of late game heroics that we saw to Russell Westbrook. I don't know if he can do anything close to that again, but if they're winning a bunch more games, he's still having really high averages, and he continues to have those MVP moments, if you want to steal from the Heisman moment phrase. If he's able to do that with Paul George on his team, and who knows, maybe because of George, maybe there's better shots at the end of games. Maybe there's more of an ability to be that guy at the end of games. It's just going to be really interesting to see how all of these factors that played in last year, where the measures are this year and how that weighs in voters' minds.
Okay, guys, let's wrap it up with one more topic on Russell Westbrook, and that's this contract extension. What in the world is going on with this contract extension? We're a little more than a month away from Media Day, which kind of kicks off the start of the season, and then training camp a little more than 2 months away from the start of the season itself. Guys, is he going to sign this thing?
I'm not entirely sure. We talked about this before. He has more options if he waits until summer of 2018. Right now, all he can do is sign the 5-year extension, which will make 6 years guaranteed, or he can just go into the season as a free agent. If he waits till the summer, he can sign a deal for as long as he wants or as short as he wants. So in this place that he's at, where he doesn't know where the Thunder is going to be a year from now, Paul George might be out the door. They might go and bring somebody else in, like hypothetically a Carmelo Anthony or somebody else who is going to get traded. I'm not going to throw any more names out there and get you guys all jazzed up.
John Wall.
I was about to say Anthony Davis, so y'all would have been all freaking out and making all kinds of crazy aggregated things. But Russell Westbrook, he might not have any idea where this team's going to be a year from now. So to me, if I were in Russell Westbrook's shoes, I might think that I want to keep my options open as much as possible. He's got a lot going on in his life this summer as well. New baby, jet setting all over the nation, going to Sports Illustrated parties, working out with teammates, having to set up things here in terms of his family when they get ready to come back for the season. So I'd be concerned if I was a Thunder fan, but at the same time, I wouldn't be in complete panic mode because you still have the guy under contract for a year. You still got Paul George coming in this year, and they're going to have a great season if they're all healthy.
Barry, like Eric, you did a chat this week, and about 20 questions was about Russell Westbrook and whether or not he's going to sign the extension. Do you think he'll sign it? What do you think he's waiting on?
I have no idea what he's waiting on. I think he's, it could be the fact that before the Paul George trade, you sort of knew what the future foundation of the Thunder was. Now, it's not as clear. So maybe that's giving him pause. I tend to think he's not going to sign now because we're now more than halfway well, not halfway, but approaching halfway to the window of opportunity, and he's not done it. And every day that passes means it's less likely that he's going to. That makes me. I went from fairly optimistic, now fairly pessimistic, that he won't sign this summer.
The Thunder remains confident, Jenni. They're optimistic that he will sign. I don't know why, but they are optimistic. Maybe that means they know something.
My glass is still half full. I am not a pessimist yet, Barry Trammell. But, I mean, I do. It's peculiar. Let's be honest. I mean, it's odd that, you know, there were a small handful of guys that could do this deal. Most of them jumped at the chance to sign the long-term deals, to get the guaranteed money, to have these mega max deals. I think your guy John Wall was the last of the first four to do it, and it was like a month after, and that seemed like a long time. But here we sit, you know, in mid-August, and Russell Westbrook hasn't done it yet at all. Now, we all know he's a weird guy. He does things on his terms. Maybe this is just Russell Westbrook doing things on his terms. I have no idea, but I still think he's going to sign it. But it is, I mean, the intrigue grows. As Barry's right, every day goes by, you just are sort of scratching your head a little bit more. What's the holdup? What's the wait? Why not get this thing done? You know, and again, I go back to, I know that it's a different scenario, but I still go back to the fact that he's sitting on a deal that would guarantee him nearly $250 million. I just have a hard time seeing how, regardless of the future of anything, your future financially is set in a way that is almost unbelievable. It's almost unfathomable. So the fact that that piece of paper would be sitting there and would be unsigned at this point, it's just a little crazy to me.
Let's hope he signs it. Thanks, guys. And thank you for joining us. That's all for Thunder Thursday. For the best Thunder coverage anywhere, stay right here at newsok.com and make sure to read us every day in the Oklahoman.